Good morning, everyone. Mike's MMA Picks right back at you here with another Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown show for UFC Vegas 71, where we have a heavyweight banger on our hands between Curtis Blaydes and Sergey Pavlovich. Don't see that fight hitting the scorecards. Should be a excellent main event, and we have 11 fights to break down. Unfortunately, Carini, Silva, and Priscilla Cachoeira was scrapped late yesterday. So 11 fights. Let's get things kicked off on this festive fight morning where we have first fight of the night. Brady Heestand taking on Batgari Dana in a bantamweight matchup. And you have the first thing that jumps off the page is the 10-year age difference in this bout. A sick jitsu fighter, Brady Heestand, fighting under the likes of Michael Chiesa, a fighter who is going to try to look to grapple in this specific matchup. Now, he's headed up against a fight-ready combatant who is well-trained, somebody who fights to his strengths. And those strengths are punches that are going to inflict damage. Brady Heestand is there to be hit. Now, it's a matter of, can Heestand take this fight to the mat, secure top position, rinse and repeat throughout? Has Heestand made significant improvements headed into this bout? Granted, only 23 years of age, so there is some opportunity, some potential there that maybe he closed the gap here and developed his skills. This line has been closing. I've noticed that Dana is now minus 140 since I put up the graphics. The line is even getting shorter here. I'm still leaning Batgari Dana. I did not make a play on this fight. One of the reasons I didn't is although Batgari is a fantastically trained fighter, he is a complete finished product at this stage in his game, and Heestand is still developing. So I'm going to be picking Batgari Dana, but this fight is a dangerous one because if Batgari Dana does not land on Heestand's button, then he could push a pace here and end up weathering the storm. So give me Batgari Dana, and let's continue the journey. Second fight of the night, where we have Francis Marshall taking on William Gomez. Gomez coming in as the plus 165 underdog, and you have Francis Marshall minus 195 at the betting window. Marshall, Kurt Pellegrini trained, who I've seen the Batman fight in person. His protege here, Francis Marshall, is a wrestler who will look to close distance and reminds me to a certain degree of Grant Dawson out there, a young Grant Dawson. He's trying to find the back. He relies on his pressure to cause opponents fits. William Gomez, I must mention this, one of the last fighters to the scale yesterday. So that's a concern of mine. The guy came in at 147, and then he had to cut a pound to make the limit here, 146. You have a French fighter in William Gomez who, what can you say? He fought another European fighter last time out, and he implemented his wrestling and looked solid on the mat. But Marshall, I believe, as far as the pedigree goes, as far as from a technical perspective, Marshall has Gomez beat on the mat. Now, when we're talking standing, Gomez, the longer fighter here, the fighter who is going to pick his spots, try to fight at range. This is taking place in the friendly confines of the UFC Apex. I think we're going to see a pressure cooker of a fight implemented by Francis Marshall. The Marcelo Rojo bout, when I watched that back, there are some red flags as far as Marshall's striking defense goes. He sometimes doesn't seem to pay attention to what's coming back at him, and that is a situation where a fighter could end up in a rude awakening here. Could Gomez be that guy? Possibly, but I think the more likely outcome here is Francis Marshall ends up pressuring and putting it on William Gomez. I'm going to be picking Francis Marshall here. I was hoping that this line would be a little bit shorter here. I'm a little uncomfortable playing Marshall at minus 195 or higher, but I will be picking him to win. And I think that the weight cut coming across the pond for William Gomez and also facing a striker, a wrestler in a situation where there isn't much room to evade is going to be his recipe for a loss here. So give me Francis Marshall. Next up, we have Muhammad Usman taking on Junior Taffa. I mentioned this with John Coe and Rob a few nights ago that I wonder how many folks out there think that this is Kamaru Usman taking on Justin Taffa. Both of these fighters are brothers of UFC combatants. Muhammad Usman, massive heavyweight, someone who looks fairly intimidating on the scales, but when you watch him fight, the guy has so many holes in his game, like Swiss cheese, to be honest. And Junior Taffa is 4-0, ripe, someone who is not a seasoned veteran when it comes to mixed martial arts. Also, it seems like he came in rather heavy originally, was looking to enter the UFC, I would think, as a light heavyweight. He has the frame of a light heavyweight, but he's coming in here, I believe, around 250 or so pounds. So you have to wonder what the game plan was from that perspective. I do believe that Taffa is going to try to throw caution to the wind and land the kill shot on Muhammad Usman. Can he do that? Possibly. Usman, we know that he is capable of grounding opponents and smothering them with pressure, but I don't trust Usman's game. I don't trust Usman much at all, to be honest. I'm trying to um, formulate a response here that's going to articulate my thoughts. And Usman, I'll be honest, I watch him fight, and there's so many glaring holes. And one of them is another fighter who is very rigid out there, and that is a cause for concern. Now, could Taffa get taken down and grounded out? Yes, yes. I mean, that's another glaring hole as a 4-0 fighter. I think you've got some chutzpah to just walk right into the UFC and not have a developed ground game to be able, or a get-up game. And that is a situation where one of the most frustrating things when you bet on a fighter is when they get grounded and they have no semblance of a get-up game. And I have a feeling Taffa is in that boat, but one of the best takedown defenses is to knock out your opponent on the feet, right? I think that was Michael Bisping who mentioned that. So I'll be picking Junior Taffa. I think that he finds the target here and takes Muhammad Usman out of there. We have some comments in the section here this morning. Let's see. Good morning, Ben. Great to see you. Francis, strictly business today. Yes. Donnie, excellent. Great to see you. Thank you for tuning in this morning. Now let's talk women's featherweights. You do not see this weight class in action often, and both of these fighters have participated in bouts down at 135 pounds. They weren't asked to cut much for this one, but you saw Norma Dumont sitting right now at minus 115. She was an underdog at one point. This line has moved slightly. Carol Hosa coming in at minus 105. Now, one thing, go to the UFC website. You'll see in Tapology, Norma Dumont has been listed as the taller fighter, and she, you would think, would be the bigger fighter here, but Carol Hosa is looks like an inch or two taller than Norma Dumont here. Also looked to be carrying some extra weight in this matchup. I know Norma Dumont carries a lot of weight in the lower portion of her body. Both of these fighters do. You watch Norma Dumont, Sanda background, somebody who had some success against Aspen Ladd. Who doesn't have success against Aspen Ladd early in fights until her corner gets on her ass and tells her to go for it? Carol Hosa, volume striker who has decent cardio, but I'll be honest, the Lena Landsberg matchup, I watched that back a few times, and there have been other matchups where Carol Hosa makes some bonehead decisions. You see the spinning attacks, and she's had trouble on the bottom. I mean, granted, she fought Sarah McMahon, right? And you've seen her struggle at times. She hasn't been able to put anybody away inside of the UFC, and this is a toss-up fight. I have to lean, if you're gonna ask me to make a pick here, I have to lean towards, the Carol Hosa side. I think that Norma Dumont is more of a finished product at 32 years of age, coming into this bout. I know Hosa has the more mixed martial arts experience. Sorry, professional mixed martial arts experience, and I think that the volume, it's simplistic sometimes with low-level women's mixed martial arts. In this bout, Carol Hosa, I think the volume here is going to be a difference maker. I wonder about the cardio in this spot. Both of these fighters, um, Carol Hosa typically has the better cardio here, but I didn't like what I saw against Landsberg, man. Both of them were huffing and puffing at the end of a 3-round fight there, and I'll be picking Hosa, long story short. Dumont, she's a finished product, and I'm not very impressed. Next up, where we have Montel Jackson taking on Ronnie Yaya. Ronnie Yaya coming in as the plus 440 underdog. And we know, look up and down Ronnie Yaya's record. He has over 20 submission victories to his credit. Very impressive. Now, fights out of a great camp at ATT. He is 38 years of age, and he's taking on a Montel Jackson who, it's almost like he's on another planet sometimes when he fights. He tends to check out for a few seconds here and there. It doesn't seem to compute that his opponent is about to be taken out of the fight, and he hasn't necessarily poured it on. Against Julio Arce, great fight. Impressed with his performance there. The JP Buys fight, that fight could have been stopped a few times. But Jackson has a tendency to back off, land his straight punches, and the kill shot, I think, is going to be there in this bout versus Ronnie Yaya. I mentioned 38 years of age. He's coming off of a neck surgery. So that's one of the reasons for his extended layoff. I know he was supposed to fight Cody Garbrandt also, but I don't trust Ronnie Yaya coming off of neck surgery at 38 years of age. I'm leaning and picking the favorite, Montel Jackson. I think he gets this done inside the distance. I saw Fight Doesn't Go the Distance sitting at minus 215 hit that, and I believe that that's a solid number here in a bout where the smaller octagon, both of these fighters, you have to, I mean, is Yaya going to sit at the end of Montel Jackson strikes for a significant amount of time? That's a dangerous proposition. We've seen Yaya cracked against Kang and others. So I am picking Montel Jackson, and I think he gets it done inside the distance. Flea, great to see you. By the way, excellent job as bassist of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Next up, we have Rick Glenn taking on Christos Giagos. Rick Glenn coming in as the minus 155 betting favorite. Christos Giagos plus 135. You watch back the tape, and Christos Giagos, I mean, he has a solid wrestling game. He can put opponents on the mat, and then he ends up gassing out in many of his fights. I remember even watching back the bout against Chris Wade in his first stint as a UFC fighter. You watch Christos Giagos hang in there against Charles Oliveira deep into the fight. Arman Sarukian mollywopped him, but the resume for Christos Giagos, you have to wonder, how did he get these fights, and who was his manager to continue to put him into these bouts where there's a steep hill to climb? Rick Glenn, tough as nails. I remember having a play on Dennis Bermudez against Rick Glenn. I thought Bermudez won that fight, but you saw Glenn tough as nails, not going to check out. He also, I believe, is coming off of a hip related injury that's kept him on the shelf for some time. But in this fight, I think it's going to end up becoming a war of attrition and come down to who has the better gas tank here. And it's pretty clear that Rick Glenn has a much better gas tank. We watched the Gavin Tucker fight and others where the second and third rounds of these fights, Rick Glenn can turn on the jets, and he's reliant on volume and pace, and also Giagos. The blueprint is there for him to continue to gas out again and again. I know he moved to Killcliff, I believe, for this bout, but I don't think that is going to pay dividends here. I'm going to be picking Rick Glenn, and I am a little worrisome about Rick Glenn as an elder statesman in this sport. Um, one of my late grandfather told me, Michael, all good things eventually come to an end, and that could be a situation here where Rick Glenn ends up losing this bout. But I think more often than not, you have to trust the tape, and what you see is Giagos gassing. So I'm going to be picking Rick Glenn. Next up, we have Jeremiah Wells taking on Matthew Semelsberger. I earlier today went up with the play of Matthew Semelsberger at minus 105, and Jeremiah Wells, he can be had for minus 105. Matthew Semelsberger, the line has moved here where now Semelsberger is a favorite. Semelsberger is a fighter who's still developing. The younger fighter in this matchup, much less miles on his odometer. Wells, 36 years of age, explosive fighter who's, I believe he has 5 consecutive finishes. In the UFC, we've seen that he reminds me a little of Vanderlei Silva on the feet, the way he's constantly throwing hooks, just exploding into his strikes. And Wells does not care what's coming back at him. And in this bout, it's interesting. Matt Semelsberger, I was listening to interviews in the lead up to this fight. I think it was James Lynch who put one together where Semelsberger said that he's at peace knowing that he could potentially be slept on April 22nd, and that he knows he's going to have to go for it. You watch the Jake Ellenberger fight, you watch the Morono fight. There have been others where Semelsberger has shown us that he has solid cardio. He's got a great chin. And when he decides to go for it and turn on the jets, he can be a difference maker. And Wells, although extremely dangerous both on the feet and on the mat, I'm going to be rolling with who was the underdog, Matt Semelsberger. I'll be picking Semelsberger, and I also think that this fight is going to end inside the distance. I had, if you check my BetMMA.tips profile, I also went up with a half unit play on Fight Doesn't Go the Distance at minus 190. I'm putting out a lot of free plays this year, and am up over 120 units. We're having a winning 2023 so far. This is our 6th consecutive winning year, third-party tracked. So we'll see how this fight plays out. I think that there is some value on the underdog here. Matt Semelsberger, who is now just within the past few hours moved to a favorite. And I also see this fight ending inside the distance. Next up, we have a interesting bout. You have to wonder why this bout is on the main card. Yasmin Lucindo taking on Brogan Walker. Brogan Walker has been in there against Blanchfield and others. Brogan Walker is a fighter who is a mixed bag. I watched the Juliana Miller fight, and you watch other bouts. Walker can be tagged up on the feet. She does not have a great gas tank, and she swells up pretty bad in the facial area. And she's taking on a Yasmin Lucindo, who is a bit of a wild woman out there. I think the neck tattoo is a giveaway also here that she is willing to go all out in the name of victory. And not only that, but she can push a hellacious pace. And Lucindo is, I believe that there's a reason she's in this spot on the main card at only 21 years of age. You look at her, even her body isn't fully developed from a strength perspective. I think that she could spend more time in the gym working to, well, really, to be honest, you look at the weight class that this fight's taking place at 125 pounds. It wouldn't surprise me to see Lucindo drop down to 115 pounds at some point. Um, in this fight, though, Lucindo, she is solid striker, is very, very aggressive on the mat also from a submission perspective. She's somebody who's going to go for it. And Walker, I can't get out of my head watching the I can't get it out of my head watching back the Aaron Blanchfield fight. Watch Brogan Walker get completely pieced up. And this is just a couple of years ago. Lucindo has the tools on the feet here to do some serious damage. And I think that we're going to see Lucindo win this fight inside the distance. Um, I have we played a parlay of, and I rarely make parlays. And that's probably like 2% of my entire strategy when it comes to betting MMA. But I have Lucindo and Bobby Green tied up in a small parlay, 1 unit. But I also just went up with Lucindo inside the distance at, I believe, plus 225. A little surprised that the number sitting at that fight doesn't go the distance, is around plus 160, plus 170. But when you look at potential outcomes here, I think that Lucindo is the real deal. It's very rare for me to make a play on a women's mixed martial arts bout, and I know she's coming off of a loss, and she's a young fighter. But Lucindo, she checks off a lot of the boxes here. And one of them is simply aggression. She has a solid gas tank too. We saw she can go 3 rounds hard. And Brogan Walker has a tendency to fade in fights. She can get lit up on the feet. And I'm going to be picking Lucindo to win inside the distance. Next up, we have Bobby Green taking on Jared Gordon. Bobby Green, minus 265. Jared Gordon, plus 225. My heart goes out to Jared Gordon. I've been a big supporter of his, both inside and outside of the octagon. He's a tremendous guy, and he, I believe, won that fight against Paddy Pimblett last time out. Now he's getting a tough test against a very accurate striker who, it's interesting, Jared the Flash Gordon is Jared's nickname, but in this fight, Bobby Green is the much quicker, much faster, if you want to say flash. That flash can be applied to Bobby Green in this matchup, who is slick, is accurate, and that is going to likely be on display here, unless Bobby Green was seriously affected at 36 years of age by the Drew Dober knockout. I don't think that's the case. We saw at stare downs yesterday that Bobby Green seems like he's here for business, and he may incorporate some pleasure as well when he's inside of the octagon by pouring it on in this fight. I'm going to be picking Bobby Green to stay evasive and to use his footwork and his slick striking. I look no further than the Nasrat Haqparast matchup. I personally thought Haqparast was in a great spot there, and I picked Haqparast, but it was clear as day that Bobby Green still has tremendous boxing, crisp. When he wants to go, he can find the target, and his defensive striking, I know he got caught in a firefight. That happens when you fight for that long against Drew Dober. But Bobby Green is going to be the pick here. And I also am leaning towards pulling the trigger on a Bobby Green inside the distance play. I believe his TKO prop is sitting at plus 300 or so. And I know Jared Gordon tough as nails, but we've also seen Charles Oliveira and others turn off his lights. And I think Bobby Green inside the distance is sitting around plus 275 or so. I think that's a solid number for a small play. You don't want to empty the clip on any of these props, but I'll be picking Bobby Green and Bobby Green to win inside the distance. I think he gets the TKO here, and both of these fighters in their mid-30s. So it's not like you have a up-and-comer versus a veteran here. Both of these fighters, seasoned veterans. So give me Bobby Green in that spot. Next up, we have Brad Tavares taking on Bruno Silva. Now, Bruno Silva, very dangerous striker. I don't put much stock into Bruno Silva's ground game. I know he was awarded his black belt against a victory over Andrew Sanchez. Watch that fight back, and makes you wonder why his team chose to award him his black belt in that specific bout. Maybe he wasn't submitted in that fight. I know he ended up, I believe, knocking out Andrew Sanchez, and it was a situation where Sanchez just completely gassed out. Silva coming off of back-to-back losses here. GM3 had some success on the feet, and originally I was thinking, man, Silva, what the hell is going on here? We know he's been popped by USADA in the past. His body is changing fight to fight. He even looks like another person, even this way, and looked a little bit more filled out and ready to go here against a Brad Tavares who is long in the tooth, a fighter who has tremendous UFC experience, has gone, and he was beaten to a pulp by Israel Adesanya. I know he took that fight injured, and Tavares, I see a lot of hate out there for Dricus du Plessis. I personally think Dricus du Plessis is the goods, but let's be honest here. Robert Whittaker, not a great stylistic matchup for Dricus du Plessis, who should get picked apart. And what's interesting, I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but I was listening to, I believe John Coe did an interview with Dricus du Plessis, and he was asking for the Whittaker fight. He wants this fight. He thinks it's a great stylistic matchup for him. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. But Brad Tavares took loss to Dricus du Plessis, and no shame in that, to be honest. No shame in that. I know he hasn't finished many fighters, and he's a tough UFC veteran. We've seen Tavares finished a few times in the past. I think this will be a striking affair for however long it lasts. And both of these fighters should end up trading in the pocket in the smaller octagon. Now, who's going to wilt here? Good question. Good question. This fight, I believe, should be lined much closer than it is now. But I'll be picking Brad Tavares in this bout. I was on the fence here. I wanted to see how Bruno Silva came in at weigh-ins. And after doing more research, I believe that Tavares, I think that he could walk away with the victory here, and I'm not completely sold on Bruno Silva. I think he might be shop worn here. Both of these fighters might be shop worn, but I'll be picking Brad Tavares. He has more tools, more UFC experience, better gas tank. Give me Brad Tavares. Now, Chris, good morning. Good morning, Mike. Hope you crushed the slate today. Also, to everybody watching, make sure you stocked and slapped that like button on your way out. All right. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Let's get to the main event of the evening, my friends, where we have Sergey Pavlovich taking on Curtis Blaydes. Curtis Blaydes coming in at -165 at the betting window. We know that there's a clear wrestling path to victory here. I don't trust Pavlovich's get up game. I don't trust his cardio, but I do trust Pavlovich's punching power. There's no doubt about that. The guy can string combinations together, and once he starts doing that, his opponents, even if they try to shell up with the small gloves, we've seen these punches end up getting through the guard and finding the target and putting a stamp on a lot of folks. So Pavlovich, yes, extremely live here for an early knockout. That's clear. But Curtis Blaydes, we've seen him stop 3 times in his professional mixed martial arts career, and he's faced some stiff competition. Curtis Blaydes finished by Ngannou twice and by Derek Lewis. And we saw some hesitancy there from Curtis Blaydes against Derek Lewis. He cannot be hesitant here against Pavlovich. Against Giagos was testing his stand-up. We didn't get to see much in the Aspinall fight. In this bout, though, I have to lean towards the favorite here, Curtis Blaydes. I got in on Curtis Blaydes at minus 152. We played him for 2 units there. And the reason for that play is number one, the wrestling. Number two, the cardio. Number three, the veteran experience. I know Pavlovich, we saw against Overeem get completely annihilated with no semblance whatsoever of a ground game and get up game. And that, to me, you have to go by what you've seen play out in the octagon in the past, and you can't trust what you haven't seen. So Blaydes has a number of advantages in this specific matchup. I'll be picking him here, but yes, there is the possibility that he gets starched. And unfortunately, a lot of these props are so wide that they're unplayable. A fight doesn't go the distance is, I believe, over minus 1,000. Under 2.5 is minus 280, minus 300 at one point. And I could see Blaydes ending up in top position, raining down elbows, splitting Sergey Pavlovich open on the mat. But I also could see Curtis Blaydes here laid out unconscious on the mat as well. But most likely, the more likely outcome is Curtis Blaydes wins this fight inside the distance via TKO. Surprisingly, Blaydes hasn't really developed his submission game. So that isn't necessarily a likely outcome here. But the pick and play is going to be Curtis Blaydes. I want to wish everybody a fantastic fight morning. Remember, you can check out my plays for free at betmma.tips. You can check me out at MMA Oddsbreaker. I put out content out there, and at the All-Star as well. So been joining a bunch of different teams. It's been a fantastic run. We're getting bigger, better, stronger, faster, smarter, and every time out looking to pick our spots. So want to wish everyone a fantastic fight day. And remember to go get what's yours. We're going to bang this out. 32 minutes, spoke about 11 fights, and want to do the card justice. So let's get it. Let's get it. One fight at a time.